Have you ever felt that you were a big fish in a small sea? That no matter what you did, it wouldn't make much of a difference at the end of the day, anyways? That your strong held beliefs and values weren't being represented in today's society? Luckily, you are able to combat this feeling. You're able to put a voice to your values and beliefs. According to Elections Canada, voter turnout in the Canadian federal election in 2015 was 68.5%. While this is better than many other countries, this is still not as high as it should be. If you're anything like me, this leads you to ask the question, why? Why are people not voting? Does our vote even really matter? I was raised by two parents that hammered home the ideal from a young age that if you do not vote, you do not get a right to complain about anything the government is doing that you may not stand for. With many of my friends not voting, as they told me it is too hard to get to the election place, or they simply don't have time, I want to do some digging into why your vote is important. From my research, I discovered that your vote does matter. It is important we all do our best to get to the polls on election day. Today I will tell you about why your vote matters, why it affects you, and why you need to simply change your mindset regarding the matter. From what I've heard from my friends who don't bother to vote, the feeling I get is that they feel their vote simply does not or will not matter in the grand scheme of things. So I think this is an important topic to address first. First off, vote is important because you really can make a difference in the results of an election. There have been multiple elections in history decided by few votes. The 2000 presidential election between Al Gore and George Bush ultimately came down to Florida being the swing state, or the deciding state, which Bush won by 537 votes out of a total of 5,963,000 cast in Florida. Bringing this point a little closer to home, in the Canadian federal election in 2008, the Vancouver South District was won by merely 20 votes out of 41,852. There is also a chance that your vote can be the deciding vote in the election. According to research at the University of California, Berkeley, the American voter has a 1 in 60 million chance of being the decisive vote in the presidential election. Compare that to your odds of winning the Powerball jackpot, where your chances are approximately 1 in 292 million. This looks pretty good. So you may still be wondering why any of this affects you, and which I will now tell you why. Politics are involved in nearly every aspect of our lives, whether we like it or not. By casting a ballot for a certain party, you're essentially supporting what that party stands for. This determines how they will spend your hard-earned taxpayer dollars. You are the one electing people who have the power to make a real difference in your daily life. The person you help to elect often hires down the chain, all the way down to your local police officers who, depending who you are, you may deal with on a daily basis. Also, by choosing not to vote because you do not like the candidates, you are doing nothing to change the status quo of the political spectrum. This brings us to our last point. Knowing your vote has the power to make a difference often requires a shift in your mindset. To demonstrate this, I am going to share with you a short philosophy problem known as the tragedy of the commons. On a basic level, it goes something like this. In a small village, there is a common area of land used by all villagers to graze their animals. As the population increased, the pressure upon the land increased as well. In turn, the community decided to limit access to the land, to allow each farmer only a limited amount of space to feed the bare minimum of livestock required. As this happened, each farmer thought along the lines of, if I can graze only one extra animal, it will make a small difference to the commons, but it will make a very big difference to me. Although each farmer is right, the end result is that this thinking caused the land to collapse. It is no longer able to support the number of livestock. The land is no longer usable because of the many small-scale decisions made by the farmers. Think about this in reverse. This goes back in reverse to each of us thinking that our vote will not matter in the election. If you think of it, how do you know the person beside you doesn't think that their vote matters as well? What about the two people next to them? If you go along the line, this can add up to many votes not being cast simply because people think that their vote does not matter. This is somewhat what happened in the Brexit vote in 2016 in Britain. 70% of voters aged 18 to 24 voted to remain in the European Union. However, only 64% of eligible voters in this age category showed up to the polls, while 90% of voters over age 65 showed up to the polls and eventually voted to exit the European Union. Well, we have now reached the end, and I hope these points will help you reach the polls next election. To review, I have told you today all why your vote is important and why I believe every one of you should vote whenever possible. I have informed you why your vote really does matter. I have shown you why voting does affect you. I have demonstrated how switching your mindset to the fact that your vote is important can help you get your vote in. I sincerely hope that you feel like a bit of a bigger fish in a smaller sea now, knowing that you can really have a say in the seemingly overwhelming world of politics.